All right. Well, thanks, folks, for coming out to this. What I hope will be an interesting reading of or evening of conversation reading and art. Yesterday was the release of this book, my first book. I Am Here, You Are Not. I Love You. Thanks. Which is a biography of my aunt and uncle, Andrew Topolsky and Cindy Cefaletto. And before I'm not going to read right away. We've got some guests here I'll talk about in just a minute. But before we all begin, I just want to explain why Andy and Cindy as the subject for biography. Luckily, that this question came. Yeah.
What's about the book?
What's the book about? Yes. Well, great question. So these two people on the front cover, Andrew Topolsky and Cindy Cefaletto, were two visual artists. They were also my aunt and uncle, and were close with me until they passed away very, very young. I initially started to write about them, I think because of my own relationship, but then as I dug in deeper and got to talk with some people who knew them, like Peter and like Charlie, I realized that they were interesting in a different way that was somewhat removed from my own relationship. When I think about the types of artists who normally get biographies or films made about them, it's the Warhols and the Basquiats, and I think their life experience is more shaped by celebrity than it is by being a working artist. And so I thought to attempt a biography of two working artists who weren't celebrities might actually be a way of getting at that lifestyle that would be more representative. So that's one of the things I hope to accomplish in this. Yeah.
I'm sorry I'm asking so much questions.
That's all right.
What age did they pass away at?
So Cindy was 49, and Andy would have been 56. Yeah. No, thank you. So Andy passed in 2008, Cindy in 2012. And then I only started this project in about 2020. The only other thing I want to say about them, and then I'll stop speaking for a little bit, is that I also found them interesting because of the time period that they lived through. So they're both from Buffalo, New York, and we'll talk a little bit more about Buffalo, New York in a minute, but they sort of emerged onto the scene in the very middle of what was 2 decades in Buffalo that really couldn't have happened at any other time and really couldn't have happened at any other place, and probably nothing like that will ever happen again. I'm thinking about that a lot lately because of the cuts to funding at the NEA and the NEH and how that's all trickling down elsewhere. What happened in Buffalo was really only possible because of a lot of money that was flowing freely and easily, plus rent being very cheap and space being plentiful. But stepping outside of Buffalo for a minute, Cindy and Andy also lived through an interesting transformation in the economics of art and in the celebrity of art making that saw art become a multi-billion-dollar industry in their lifetimes. And some people were able to ride that wave and others were not as well. But it was a significant transformation, I think, in art history. So that was why I wrote the book, and I'll read from it a little bit later. But first, I wanted to thank two guests who are here tonight, Howard Fishman and Charlie Clough. Yeah, thanks to both of you. Who I asked to be here for very different reasons. Howard Fishman wrote a fantastic biography of the musician and songwriter Connie Converse. I'm sure he'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but that is, I think, in some ways it's monumentally larger of a project than what I attempted. But I think they're similar in spirit, in a focus on maybe overlooked artists, and then an inquiry into why that happens to some people. And then Charlie is actually a character in this book. We haven't talked about how you feel about that, but I hope I did an all right job. Charlie was a co-founder of Hull Walls, which was one of the sort of brightest spots in that constellation of interesting things happening in Buffalo, and a place that launched the careers of many artists. It's also where I launched this book last night, so it's still going. What Charlie started 50 years ago is still going. Yep.
You wrote that book last night?
No, I wrote it starting in 2020. It took me a while, but it just came out last night. Yeah. Maybe my next book I'll write that fast. So, anyway, as I said, I'll stop talking now. I wondered, Charlie, if you wanted to speak first.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, is that okay, Howard? that device is picking up the sound, right?
Yeah, it should be.
Okay, so, because I'm a sit-down person. My intro is I'm bragging about the party I was at on Thursday. And then I was going to say, and just use Google, and then my anecdote was that the woman that sat down to have dinner with me next to me was Julie. What's your last name, Julie? Tamor, and she's a big deal Broadway producer, movie producer, etc. I like books too. I mean, I'm in a bookstore and I like books, so I thought I would bring my books and have my emotional material here. And so the books, the sequence of the books, I made 120 books. Most of them are PDFs, and most of them are albums of stuff. However, in 2007, I produced this book, Pepfog, the photographic epic of a painter as a film or a ghost. This is my job description that I determined in 1976 at Hall Walls, and it is fulfilled in this book, which FedEx delivered today from my printer, Lulu, the on-demand printer. This realizes, to some extent, the photographic epic of a painter as a film or a ghost, insofar as the last 10 years, I made 1,150 some paintings that are. This is, in the format of a catalog raisonné. So there's a lot of freaking paintings, including one that Aiden made when I had my studio at the Roycroft in East Aurora, outside of Buffalo. To literalize the photographic epic of a painter as a film or a ghost, I took these 1,100 images and animated them. So if you go online, there is a YouTube in which these 1,100 some images flicker by in 47 seconds. Now that is one portion of the entire 8,000 paintings, including the 1,100 here, that make up the photographic epic of a painter as a film or a ghost. There are a couple other books. This punctuates 40 years of work. Oh my goodness. It's my meditation on world religions. I think my next book is going to be called My Search for God. And I realize that I need to search for God because of our president. My other book here that describes the 4 phases of my career: research and development, efflorescence, rustication, and tenacious resilience, and ends up with the idea of the political value of art is beauty as a symbol of love. So, okay, those are my 4 books that I brought in my new Guggenheim bag, and I will just say a little bit about Hall Walls and how I met Andy Topolsky. Dwayne Hatchett, who was Andy's teacher, Dwayne Hatchett was a sculpture professor at UB who had a studio at Larry Griffiths' Ashford Hollow Foundation. Without Larry Griffiths, there would have been no Hall Walls, there would have been no so many things about Buffalo. In my mind, Larry Griffiths was not a particularly informed artist. He was very earnest, though, and he was also very generous. He was, kind of bohemian. He was a rich kid who got money from his father's textile business. He was one of 4 sons. There was Rod, who was into theater, and Jack, who helped make Hall Walls, who was a playboy, and then another guy who was an investor. And without those people, well, Larry in particular, buying this 50,000 square foot building and setting up in a situation, I had heard about it from an art gallery a couple of blocks away, can't think of the guy's name right now. But this is in. I went to Pratt for 1 year in 69, 70, and I had gone to high school for graphic design. I wanted to be a madman, but this segued with the 60s and like Vietnam and the hippies and, you know, this idea of you know, getting a house in the suburbs and like a fancy car. It sort of crashed into the Whole Earth catalog and like, wait a minute, I have to reevaluate my values here. And so I kind of opted for this beatnik hippie role in dropping out of school and being an artist at Larry Griffith's place. I did have a hiatus where I went to Toronto, Ontario College of Art, when I was afraid of the draft. Turned out my draft number was way high. It was not an issue. However, going to school in Toronto, I saw a place called A Space, an alternative space like what it was a model for Hall Walls. There were a couple of models in New York. There was Artist Space, there was 112 Green Street, and there was the Institute for Art and Urban Resources. 112 Green Street continues as White Columns, Artist Space continues as Artist Space. Institute for Art and Urban Resources turned into PS1, MoMA, and the thing is, there was a network, A Space, Artist Space, White Columns, Andor in Seattle, Paul McMahon had something in Cambridge, blah, blah, blah. It was like there was a movement, and I could see that these elements would work at Larry's building. I mean, it was this fertile node that would take this kind of energy and work. Dwayne Hatchett student Joe Pannone, along with Andy Topolsky and John Biorgi and some other guys that were Hatchett's students. Joe Pannone was a teaching assistant at Buff State, and his student was Longo, who Joe brought to Hall Walls, where I was the first one that lived there in this factory building. I don't know how it happened that I slept on 10 mattresses stacked up on the floor, and I watched the rats perambulate for real. And I showed Longo my library and told him about my experience of Artist Space and A Space and so on. He was the president of the art club at Buff State, and he is a charismatic fellow. And we put together our program of visiting artists and exhibitions. And the thing is that in your book, you're asking, well, wasn't Andy a founder? And wasn't, like Joe Pannone was a founder. The social dynamic was, Longo was a protege of Pannone. And Longo is a very quick learner and, as I say, charismatic, manipulative, ultimately a motherfucker. Did that go? Anyway, I remember Joe Pannone saying that Longo. He said, I made a Frankenstein. The thing is, if you've had experience with people that are really kind of stars, you see them coming up in your rear view mirror, and suddenly they're like way out, like somewhere over the horizon. And Joe was kind of freaked out by that, and I thought to myself, well, I know what's going to happen here, but he's good energy. Longo will be very good energy for making this thing turn into something. And the thing is that we used Albright Knox, we used media studies, the film thing at UB, and we used Art Park. We used all of these other lures within the community to draw artists, mostly from New York, but also West Coast and Europe. And what I learned at A-Space was import-export. You import the famous artists, actually not so famous. We didn't go after Johns and Rauschenberg. They were less established. Benglis, Borofsky, Sarah, and bring them to Buffalo, and then when we go to New York, we have a good audience, an informed audience, and that was the dynamic. And the first to leave was Nancy Dwyer and Mike Zwack in 1976. Cindy Sherman got a National Endowment for the Arts grant in 77, and she and Longo left, and I stuck around to make sure Hallwalls got incorporated. And once that happened, I left, and I came in October 78. By October 79, I was married with a kid, and I had a dealer, and the whole dynamic of Metro Pictures had happened, and the lead that I provided for Robert and Cindy was snatched away by them, and I got a non-dynamic dealer, and they got the good dealer, and hence history was cast as it would go into the future. C'est la vie. I should hand off.
That was great. Thank you, Charlie. I appreciate that. And I've got a lot of questions now bookmarked for when we can talk. I'll just say a little bit about Howard as well. So Howard Fishman is the author, as I said before, of To Anyone Who Ever Asks, The Life, Music, and Mystery of Connie Converse, a finalist for the Plutarch Award for Biography of the Year, and I'll say definitely an influence on my own process. He is a contributor to The New Yorker and The New York Times, and his writing has also appeared in Rolling Stone, Vanity Fair, The Washington Post, and The Boston Globe. His play A Star Has Burnt My Eye was a New York Times critic's pick. As a performing songwriter and band leader, Fishman has toured internationally for over 2 decades. He's released 11 albums to date, is the producer of the album Connie's Piano Songs, The Art Songs of Elizabeth Connie Converse, and is currently directing the world premiere of Joan Matthews' Diet Coke for the Dead at the Paradise Factory in New York City. He is based right here in Brooklyn.
So what would you like me to say? Just talk about...
Well, if you want to talk about your project or you read from the book...
No, I won't read from it. I'll keep it brief. I started my career as a musician, and it's still something that I do, but I was playing music full-time in 2010 when I was at a holiday party and I heard a song that I couldn't figure out what I was listening to. It seemed like a song that I'd known all my life, but also a song that I'd never heard before. And I heard elements of country music, of blues, of American hymn, of early American pop music, of jazz, all stitched together in this way that sounded like none of those particular things, all kinds of music that I loved. But I couldn't for the life of me figure out who was singing or what era it came from. And I found the host at the party and I asked him what it was we were listening to. And he said, "Oh, this is Connie Converse. She was a minister's daughter from New Hampshire. She moved to New York City in the 1950s and recorded all these songs in her kitchen in Greenwich Village that were way ahead of their time, and she couldn't find any commercial footing for any of it. And then one day she got in her Volkswagen Bug and drove away and disappeared and was never heard from again." So I didn't believe any of that. I mean, it sounded completely crazy to me. I didn't believe there was somebody named Connie Converse who was making this music in the 1950s who had a disappearance. So anyway, I went home that night. On my way home, I stopped at a record store. I picked up the CD, which was called How Sad, How Lovely, which was a compilation of these home recordings that she made in the 1950s. I put it on. I started listening to it obsessively. And I also started looking for information about her on the internet because I was so fascinated and curious about this mysterious person, and I wanted to know more. And there was nothing on the internet about anybody named Connie Converse, other than some reviews of this CD that had just come out. There were no reviews of her performances, nothing about recordings that she had made back then, nothing about a disappearance, nothing. The internet came to a very quick dead end. And the more I listened to the music, and the more convinced I became of the genius of this music, and the fact that I just couldn't get my head around the fact that this music was being made at that time and nobody was paying any attention to it, and it had just been discovered. I just went down a rabbit hole and decided that if nobody else was going to do it, I was going to try to do what I could to unearth the story of this woman. And I spent the next 12 years doing that. And do you have a copy of my book? Did I see you walk in with it?
Yeah.
May I have it for a moment? And so the result of that is now there's a lot more information about Connie Converse than there was back then. And this book it's part biography, but it's also part detective story. It involves me following the breadcrumbs and knocking on doors, just like Aidan did in his book, and sometimes following breadcrumb trails that led nowhere, and then other times finding revelations that were just mind-boggling. She is the most interesting, talented, intelligent person that you've never heard of. And I think it's only a matter of time before she's a household name, because I think she represents a new reference point in American cultural history based on all of the different projects that she was doing. She was not only a musician, she was a poet, she was a visual artist, she was a novelist wannabe, she was a photographer, she wrote and illustrated an unpublished children's book, she was a scholar, a lecturer, she was an activist, she did deep dives into statistics and race relations in America and peace studies. And yes, she disappeared in 1974. She wrote letters to family and friends saying, "Nothing has worked out for me. I'm going to start a new life. Please don't come looking for me." And the car was never found and her body was never found. So there are parallels with the work that Aidan has done with his book. And I think the main intersect for me is, and a big part of what my book is about as well, is what does success mean in our culture? How do we measure success? Because to me, Connie Converse was a huge success. Everything she did was so amazingly articulated and couldn't be better. And yet, she didn't, no money or fame or prestige came her way as a result of it. So, in some sense, she was a failure, which is awful. So that's my little spiel. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
We should all be crying.
Yeah. That leaves me at a really interesting place, I think, actually, where I want to pick up this question of what is success. So one of the people I was speaking with last night, an artist named Matt Kenyon, pointed out that in Andy and Cindy's lives, even in moments where, they were facing material difficulty in some way, they did find ways to keep making art and keep creating. Even Cindy, when she didn't have an active studio practice, kept finding ways to kind of create into the world. And Matt, the visual artist in that room yesterday, pointed out that in a way is success. But it's not one that our culture necessarily recognizes often. But we also need material success too, just to keep going and surviving in some cases. So I think that's where I actually wanted to open tonight. I'm just going to drop into kind of the middle of the book. Well, early middle. So as I said, there was a scene in Buffalo roughly between 1962 and 1982 that, as I said, couldn't really have happened anywhere else. A lot of it was happening at Hall Walls, but it was happening all over the place. And while a lot of the attention has been on the west side, I wanted to go to the east side in this book for a little bit, so I'll start there. A side door bangs open onto Plater Street, the heart of the east side of Buffalo, beating with a pacemaker. And out comes a gang the locals would have called hippies. even though this is the start of the Reagan era, and the last of the hippies got tenure 2 years ago. But they have long hair, and at least since the days of Rupert and the Cavaliers, this has signaled a certain laughing disregard that engenders suspicion in the roundheads of every time and place. So, on the east side of Buffalo in 1981, they're hippies. They flash cigarette smiles and wink with Budweiser eyes, wear hip-gripping Levi's and straight-leg Dickies, Chelsea boots and cowboy boots and Chuck Taylors and second-hand Boston cracked black loafers. They're covered in corduroy, armored in leather, laughing at the last line of a riff pinched short as the doors swing shut behind them. John Toft, tall, talkative, bare-armed in a black t-shirt and oblivious to the cold, turns to his girlfriend, Lisa, and picks up the thread of a conversation started 2-3 weeks ago, with seemingly infinite ground left to cover. Something about a canvas as content instead of context. See, something about reactivating post-industrial spaces. The contradiction of intention in indeterminate music. Something about the launch of CNN, a cable TV channel broadcasting all news 24 hours a day. Crazy, right? Michael Basinski, with a dark mane, thrifted leather vest, sterling silver bolo tie, and gym teacher's mustache, walks ahead, humming a line from a poem he just performed over a Julius Eastman composition. Don Metz hangs back, kicks a brick to keep the door from latching behind them, the honks and ululations of a Rashawn Roland Kirk album flowing through the gap into the halogen night. And at the front of the pack, a couple that fits together like parquetry, a contrast perfectly balanced, Cindy Cefaletto and Andy Topolsky. So I just wanted to introduce Cindy and Andy in that scene and in that moment. I want to fast forward a little bit, though, because the buffalo that I just described there was a buffalo in steep decline. The east side at that point was emptying out across from this space, the Don Polsky, where for a little while they had this really interesting gallery and performance space. But there were empty storefronts, basically as far as the eye could see. And people, as Charlie said, were basically getting out of Buffalo. Cindy and Andy did get out of Buffalo, and I wanted to drop them into a very different scene in New York City. Before I go there, actually, I do want to say that the Buffalo that Cindy and Andy and Charlie and Peter experienced wasn't the Buffalo that I got to experience, because I was born into almost the absolute low point of Buffalo. So I just want to describe that briefly.
There were a lot of them.
Well, I'll fight for this one. I've often described my childhood in Buffalo as like growing up in a land of antique shops. Specifically, I grew up in North Buffalo, off Hurdle Avenue, a quiet, mostly residential part of the city, a melting pot of Italian, Irish, German, and Russian Jewish influences, home to the zoo and to Delaware Park, full of friendly neighbors and eccentric old homes. My description was literal. In the late 90s, Hurdle Avenue, North Buffalo's main commercial strip, was flush with antique shops and businesses that might as well have been antique shops. A jeweler, a Victorian furniture store, a second-hand bookstore, 2 framing shops, and one place filled entirely with ornate ceramic lamps, with pizza and wing joints in between. One Friday night each winter, my sister and I would bundle up and accompany our parents on the Hurdle Walk, a local initiative to support small businesses during the frigid months without foot traffic. Darkness in Buffalo descended by 4 p.m., but all of the stores would stay open late and put out treats for visitors, trays of cheese and crackers, bowls of candy, crock pots of meatballs and sweet sauce, bowls of hot spiked punch and shining carafes of coffee and Swiss Miss hot chocolate. In the way back, wine and Labatt's. We walked the entire street those nights, both sides, never in the cold for more than 1 or 2 dark storefronts, but still ducking in each bright doorway with red, runny noses, my sister and I picking our way past glass cases and precarious towers of stacked treasures to find the appetizers at the back of the room. Our parents talked to neighbors, while our attention turned to cufflinks and oil paintings, silk smoking jackets, crystal decanters, mod clock radios, each tagged with handwritten prices. But there's a deeper truth to the description. Like the proprietors of the antique shops that once stretched from our front doorstep to the horizon, all Buffalonians tend to invest in memories. to treasure trinkets that in the right light might trick us into thinking the best of the past endures. We are a city of architectural treasures, we say, but we've raised more than half of what we had, mostly to make way for abominations of design, parking lots, and enormous concrete obsolescences. We are the best planned city in the world, we say, but we turned our downtown inside out, filled it with spaghetti junctions and block after unwalkable block of windowless empty buildings, transforming a Paris of the New World into a frostbitten Potemkin village. It takes 20 minutes to get anywhere to anywhere in Western New York, we say, but our subway runs only 6.4 miles in a straight line, far from the people who need it most. Our buses are always late. We built expressways straight through the middle of our park and through historic, middle-class, and predominantly black neighborhoods, and we lack the political will and bureaucratic competence even to time the lights on Main Street. If you can get from anywhere to anywhere quickly in Buffalo, it's probably because we lack the density to clog our streets. We're like a hermit crab living in a conch shell, a people saddled with crumbling infrastructure meant for a population 3 times our size. We love to talk about Jim Kelly and Teddy Roosevelt and Frank Lloyd Wright, as if one day we might simply shake off our mistakes and again be champions, exemplars, protectors of the most prosperous little city in the world. Today, Hurdle Avenue is filled with chic boutiques and craft cocktail bars. Our waterfront is accessible, and downtown warehouses converted into lofts are filling with millennials making low 6 figures. In 2020, for the first time in 70 years, the census does not show a population decline. But we're still a city of antique shops. So that was the Buffalo that I grew up in, and I think that's one of the reasons I felt so compelled to find out more about the Buffalo that my aunt and uncle grew up in. The difference was just so stark. But they had left. By the time that I was wandering the city of antique shops, they were here in New York. So that's where I want to go next. And this scene actually features Peter, which is part of the reason I wanted to read it tonight.
Yeah.
A white liquid twinge courses Cindy's right arm, and she feels a single heartbeat, like something falling off a shelf in another room. She flexes her bicep and shifts her feet. Facing a window that opens onto an unobstructed view of water and cloud, she has the naked sensation for a moment that she is a bird, never tired in flight. She is weightless. The weight of her hands is something she presses against more than holds. The sky rushes soundlessly into the room and laces her hair with particulate ice. No, not this one, the suit says. Across from Cindy, Peter Moscato breathes relief through his nose. They lower the framed canvas, a charcoal drawing, and stack it with the others besides the neglected snake plant. The water outside the window is the Passaic River, and the sky is the sky above Newark, New Jersey's downtown business district. The building is the headquarters of Prudential, and the suit is a mid-30s executive, an AVP or VP or SVP, tasked with selecting art for the top offices of a division that has just been shuffled to this renovated floor. He wants to give the impression of having strong opinions, but can't quite put them into words. Not Picasso prints, but real, contemporary art. Nothing too political. We're in insurance, after all. Maybe safer to say nothing, what's the word, representational? Representational. Safer with something abstract. But it shouldn't feel safe. It should feel, like this building. Concrete, glass, structural steel. Something that signals power, but not greed. Not the softness of ingots, but the iron of the buried vaults that keep them. It has to be, all right, sure, sexy, but not porn, okay? This is the 7th work of art they've held against the wall for the executive's appraisal. Cindy and Peter look past his padded shoulder to the elevators, where Andy stands by a dolly stacked with a dozen works. He pulls one off the cart and removes its thin foam shroud. Cindy and Peter share a glance. They know the work at once, and it hadn't been on the list to pack this morning. Andy holds the frame out in front of him like the gospel in procession at St. Casimir's. Peter and Cindy fall back as Andy steps to the wall, holding the frame there himself and turning to watch the suit's reaction. A stark hypotenuse bisects the canvas diagonally, finely rendered in graphite dark as jet. The other legs of the triangle swing out, making a perfect shaded gradient that ends in an unmarked point where the triangle's third corner might have been. It pushes off the canvas in 3 dimensions, It is either an object fallen from space or an invitation into an ageless Cimmerian night. A certain look passes over the suit, a look Andy knows. It isn't comprehension, but recognition. A recognition that this is it, the suit says. This is the one. We'll take it. Andy lets a faint smile pass in a single pulse between the corners of his mouth, hidden by a bristly black goatee. Cindy and Peter smile too, trying to tamp amusement down into a more appropriate professional pleasure. They set about shrouding and stacking the other works and wheeling the cart into the elevator. The suit's head snaps up as if from a trance when Andy lifts the chosen work, his own of course, and wraps it in foam. We'll be back to hang it on Friday, Andy says, stepping into the elevator. This one doesn't have its mounting gear. Cindy hits the button to make the doors shut faster. Only when the compartment starts moving downward do all three of them break into breathless laughter. So just a little explanation of that one was a wonderful story that Peter told me. Cindy and Andy and Peter ended up working in New York at a gallery that did a sort of art on wheels business, bringing art from the gallery to these different offices. And this was a time when all of the professional offices, banks, law firms, insurance firms in the tri-state area were really hot on buying contemporary art, partly because it was popular, but also partly because it was a storehouse of value. And it turns out that a lot of the art that you guys sold is just sitting in warehouses around the tri-state area and has been lost. Just the other week, I was talking with the person who ran the program at UBS Bank that had purchased a lot of Andy's work, and they had completely lost the thread on a lot of it. So again, it's just sitting around here in warehouses. And that's why I wanted to talk about material success, because that was necessary to sort of keep them going, pay the bills. Did it relate to the success of creation? We can talk about that. I just want to read one short final section, which is actually where the book begins, because the book begins at an ending of a kind. It was the ending of Andy and Cindy's life together. She lets him help her move the armchair from its spot against the pale plaster wall. Really, Cindy does the lifting, tugging, stutter-stepping to clear a space. Opposite, the upholstery sags, straining beneath his fingers. When she moves to lift the framed drawing from the wall, then inch out the nail that held it, he rests, laying his palms flat against the chair's faded arms. Still and splayed like this, his hands look white, like enormous summer moths. 4 months ago, Andy had been built like a laborer, eating well and breathing mountain air, putting in shifts at his studio beside their home in Calicut, a hamlet tucked in the Catskills. He lifted bricks and stones for sculptures, practiced joinery with heavy beams meant for dining sets that friends and neighbors had commissioned. But now, back in the city for appointments with specialists, stairs dizzy him, elevators give him vertigo, small talk leaves him breathless. Budweiser still sits well, but even simple foods, favorite foods, can make him nauseous. Cindy manages. She manages the double-mortgaged house in Calicut, the dark rented apartment on Wither Street in North Williamsburg. She manages the correspondence, friends checking in and galleries from Buffalo to Basel inquiring. And she manages the hospitals. With weathered eyes and wiry hair from her own second round of chemo completed in the fall, Cindy knows the hospitals, knows the right people at Herbert Irving and Weill Cornell and Columbia. She knows all the sallow hallways, the exits and the dead ends. For 20 years, Cindy has managed for the both of them. She has managed Andy and Andy's career, the recognition received for his beautiful, precise, complicated, recognize-it-anywhere art. She took pride in it until one day pride was an indulgence that exhaustion wouldn't afford her. And now this. Now Andy needs her more than ever, and in new, rewardless ways. They are alone in love and knowledge of each other. Cindy manages because she must, for the both of them. But with them, it has never been just about surviving. They learn to be alone together first inside ideas. The purple t-shirt hangs loosely from Andy's shoulders. His shrinking body is a factory of bones, new protuberances emerging from him every day. His own unfamiliarity makes the shirt difficult to remove. Cindy steps to him, her small hands finding the hem hanging blousily where his stomach used to be. He looks away as she lifts, letting his arms drop and loping to the tripod as soon as he's free. He fiddles with the camera, an old Polaroid, the same one that has been with him all these years. Funny. He earned his MFA in photography and came up in the world with a group the critics called the Pictures Generation. He had been a leader among them, the far-out one that started a catch, once. But when the coffee table books were finally written, Andy was relegated to the appendix. The reason was simple. Andy stopped making pictures. For a period of years, he stopped making art altogether. But now pictures are all he can talk about. The surface, Andy says, speaking to himself, staring through the viewfinder to the open wall. A loaded gun. When he sways, it feels like the room moves with him. She thinks he's paler than the walls. Under the brutal shop lamp, his bruises glow like bar signs. Outside, snow falls and music fills the street when a car door opens. No one. Alicia Keys, one of the first hits of the new year. Cindy starts to hum along, but as soon as she begins, the song is gone. A little more, Andy says, his rumble now a rasp. Cindy tugs the chair an inch, another inch, then straightens up. Still bare from the hips, holding his waistband with one hooked hand, he shuffles into the light. Cindy sees it now, where the blank wall ends and the canvas begins. When he turns, he doesn't look into the camera. He looks to her. Their eyes shine like a river in the moonlight. Wait, he says, straightens his body to the camera. It is a minor struggle even to lift his own chin, to face, in a way, his own gaze. The cheeks behind his beard slacken, eyes go hard. Maybe this is it. The voice, his or hers, is lost inside the click. Thanks, everybody. I'll stop reading there, but if there is some time left, I want to have a bit of a conversation with Howard and with Charlie and with all of you if you have questions or things you want to share. I know actually where I want to start it is a question for you, Howard, and based off something you said as you were describing your project. You've been working on a project that I think is bigger than this book, that's around Connie Converse and the way we think about her and the access we have to her work for quite a long time. The book, in a way, I feel like is a gathering of critical mass around that. But it was interesting to hear you say that you think the big discovery, Connie becoming a household name, is still to come. How do you think about that? Like producing a work like this book, like that big moment of revelation, and then like the additional work that you need to do and others need to do beyond that. When do you feel like there will be that moment, and will you even recognize it when it comes?
Well, it's the book's been out for 2 years, and I'm still doing talks, and I always say I'll go anywhere where anyone wants me to talk about Connie Converse. But most of the talks that I do, even now, when I ask people at the beginning, how many of you know about Connie Converse already? Few hands go up. So it's been a slow burn, and I think there will come a moment where, and who knows, maybe it'll be when the book is adapted into another form, which is possible. But I think a moment will come where everybody will suddenly realize, oh my God, this is the most amazing person, and we need to know more about her and tell everybody we know about her.
Yeah. Well, I certainly hope that happens. It's interesting to think. I too think about this as a work that preceded the book actually becoming a book and is going to continue on after it. I don't know what point I'll think, all right, now I've seriously accomplished something, and it sort of can take the foot off the gas a little bit, but I hope at some point. Charlie, I wanted to ask you about the way so as you pointed out, in this book I maybe lightly challenged the canonization of the Pictures Generation and who's remembered and whatnot. I don't think that Andy is by any means a founder of Hall Walls. I didn't mean to suggest that, but certainly enough people told me he was a catalyst in a scene that included Hall Walls. I'm curious how you look back on that whole scene and who is remembered, and maybe any other people you think that are sort of left out of the frame or should be perhaps repositioned in our understanding?
Well, Robert and I were ambitious. We weren't really looking behind us. We were looking ahead. We were looking to how soon can we get out of here? How soon can we score with a dealer? How soon can we score with museums and so on? I was weird because I had gone to Pratt and dropped out, and I was sort of motivated by the breakup of a relationship. My girlfriend dumped me, and I wanted to show her, to piss her off, and so I dedicated my life to art. And the thing is that I got over the relationship. But in the meantime, I realized that art is big. I was thinking, well, Michelangelo big, Leonardo big, Rubens big. And I got really fascinated by that. And I still am. And I've had moments of success and vast stretches of failure, and I just think of I was reading about a line about William Blake, and the writer was saying, yeah, there was a time when Blake thought he might make it in the art world of London of his day, and this idea of William Blake thinking, yeah, I might make it before I die. And it didn't click for him until 25 years later that he was written about, and the thing that is William Blake loomed. Now, that said, this pyramid of fame and acknowledgement and so on, it's really rarefied. I mean, there was Josh Baer has that Baer Facts art world newsletter, and he's talking about how, well, there's 3 million artists in the America, and there's 10 million artists in the world, and every year there's another 100,000 MFAs cranked out, and it's what the fuck? I mean, the pictures generation, as it is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art catalog, that's not a generational group. That's a network of people who, they all know each other. I'm there by the skin of my teeth because Longo pushed me in. I mean, when Longo went zooming by me, when he left town in 1977, it was like I knew I was in the dust, and I would be in his dust and Sherman's dust for the rest of my life. However, the fact that their coattails were close enough that I could, try to reach out and grab on, well, it kind of worked. I mean, I'm, whatever success, not totally, but a lot of the success that I've had is because of my proximity to them. At the same time, I'll say that a lot of my failure has to do with the fact that their star glows so brightly that it obscures the fact that of whatever it was that I did. But Andy will never be part of the pictures generation because he wasn't part of the clique. I mean, it's in crowd politics that, I'll never go to P. Diddy's parties, I won't get invited. I did for a little while get invited to Cindy Sherman's A-list parties. Heck, I met Monica Lewinsky. I kissed Parker Posey, but she cut me off. And Longo too. They're so far beyond. I mean, in this, this stratosphere of fame and grooviness is disheartening, but you know, I mean, I had little bits of taste. I got bones were tossed. I enjoyed the bones such as I could, gnaw upon them. But, tough shit, Charlie. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you make of the quote I used to hear back then, that the Whitney Biennial was a map of the sexual relations within the New York art world?
Well, some people got busted
which you
for that.
just indirectly alluded.
I mean, there was some Me Too stuff that filtered through. I mean, Chuck Close got totally fucked by that. I mean, not that. I mean, maybe he deserved it, but yeah, it's who you know, and it's who. I mean, I was asking Mark Bradford. Everybody familiar with Mark Bradford's work? He was talking at the Albright, and he was talking about how he had a couple $100,000 worth of school debt, and suddenly he was in the Whitney Biennial, and he got the $100,000 prize. And I said, well, what, Mark? What, like, what clicked? I said, and he said Thelma Golden and Eileen Norton, the curator and the collector. And okay, there it is. Like, I mean, the right connection resulted in a fucking glorious career. Am I jealous? Yes. Do I think that's going to happen? No. Ultimately, do I care? Well, not really. I mean, I am fulfilled. I mean, I got work in 600 works in 70 museums. I can die today, and my dust can be blown to the wind, and my shit in the museums might last for another 100 years or 200 years or whatever. I mean, I'm into geological time. I mean, fucking Niagara Falls is only 15,000 years old, Takes 30 million years to grow a mountain range. We're dust.
Yeah. It strikes me that there's something else that connects our three lives, projects, whatever we're talking about here, and that is maybe an ambivalence with New York City.
Yeah.
Like, I'm thinking of Connie Converse coming and then deciding to leave. First deciding to come in and then deciding to leave, and you talk about the decision to do that at that particular moment and those consequences. You've been in and out of New York. When I met you, you were back in Western New York, and now you're here again. I'm just curious how you both think about that, like the relationship, the ambivalence I know from a lot of artists around New York City.
City of ambition. You come here to do something. I mean, my kids grew up here, and they didn't get it. I mean, they were just here. They didn't have to struggle to get here. And I view my ability to be here as 99% luck. The fact that certain things went the right way. I mean, a lot of stuff didn't go the right way, but the shit that did go the right way made it possible for me to get whatever I've gotten. I mean, I think I'm smart, but I know a lot of really smart people that are going nowhere. I mean, I think of Andy, for example. It sounds like I'm picking up, but it's just like, to get as far as he got, it's like, you got to be smart, you got to be lucky, and Longo is more charismatic and adept than all but a handful of people that I've ever met in my life, and he parlayed that with luck to fame and fortune, and I mean, if you're gonna go into the jungle, you gotta expect you're gonna get bitten and sliced up and fucked. So if you get less fucked than you could, that's lucky, and you took your chance, you jumped in. I don't know, what's your experience with New York?
Well, I actually haven't lived here, but in writing this book, Well, and there's an incredible passage, Howard, in your book where you talk about what it means to be an artist in New York City, just the kind of friction of living here. And I observed in this that there's this kind of in and out relationship a lot of artists have, where they come into New York as a place to make a name and to sell stuff. It's more of a marketplace, but then it becomes harder to do the work here. And so then they leave, and then they come back, and they leave, and they come back. And the moment that an artist chooses to leave, to enter or exit New York, can have enormous consequences. So I think about Connie leaving on basically the day that Bob Dylan arrives. And I think about Andy and Cindy leaving a month after Andy was in a major National Gallery show that put him in context with the greatest draftsman of the last 100 years. Was that the right time to leave New York? Probably not, So I'm curious how you think about it in terms of Connie's story.
Well, it's true she got here at the wrong time, and she left at the wrong time. And the music that she was making was ahead of its time and had no context. So music industry people didn't know what to do with her. And she was not interested in listening to feedback and making her stuff more commercial. She was a rebel. She was a woman that was not doing what women were supposed to do. She was not trading on her looks or her figure or wearing makeup or being sexy. She was sexy in her own way, but it was a very rebellious sexiness. She was a woman who smoked and drank and had one-night stands and lived alone and made this music that didn't sound like anybody else. And then she left, like you said, the day Bob Dylan got here, basically. But the one, people sometimes ask me if you could ask, if you got to meet Connie Converse, what would you want to know? What would you ask her? And one of the questions that I feel is most compelling in terms of her story is, why didn't she come back in 1965 or 1969 or 1973? When the way had been paved for the music that she was making, and there was a market for it, and music made by introspective singer-songwriters was hugely popular. Why didn't she come back and make a Connie Converse album? She didn't. She stayed in Ann Arbor and never made music again. So it's kind of curious.
Yeah. So that's the question you'd ask: is why didn't you come
It's
back?
one, yeah.
Yeah.
In the Darwinian sense, there are a lot of people who were great and didn't click. People I know, Andy, Michael Zwack.
Yeah, when you say adept, I also hear adaptable, changeable. The artists who can survive in a place like this and just see which way the wind's blowing and orient themselves pretty quickly. Andy certainly wasn't able to do that. Connie certainly wasn't doing that. Maybe sometimes because of stubbornness, or maybe because the work they were doing was just more interesting and that they knew that the time wasn't right for it or the people around them. In which case there's another path to success, I think, for the more difficult artists, and that's having a lot of advocates around you.
It's political. You have to find allies and mentors and promoters and.
Well, I just to build on that, I think a lot of Andy's success came from the fact that there were people around him who were so enamored of the work and maybe of parts of his personality that they could put up with the more difficult stuff, And I think I could think of other artists who had, sort of similar networks of support, just true believers, but that also doesn't always come together. So.
Just one other thing, though, in terms of something that you said, living in New York is hard. And Connie Converse left as she was nearing middle age, when creature comforts start to become something maybe you want to have or want to try to have. And she was living hand to mouth and had been living that way for 15 years. And one of the things I didn't say in my little spiel is that she didn't leave New York and then drive away and disappear. She left New York and reinvented herself in Ann Arbor as an intellectual and as an editor and a writer, and did that for another 14 years. So I think part of the equation maybe is how hard it is to deal with what we have to deal with when we're not making it at all. as artists, just paying the rent.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. Does anybody else have anything they want to share or ask about or throw out there?
Does I'm sorry. Does Vincent Gallo appear on your Buffalo radar screen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because he's the only that I can think of offhand, Buffalonian, I'm probably saying it wrong, who I knew, who was this sort of like, who even represented himself as like, I'm from Buffalo or whatever.
Buffalo 66.
And I saw that movie. I'd be curious to know if you think that movie has anything really to do with Buffalo or not. But I saw, we were neighbors for some time and friends, and I saw pretty closely how he went about trying to make himself successful, going from zero to where he got to, flailing around.
How's he doing now?
He's selling his sperm online for $1 million a shot. Okay?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
How's that?
I'm not making that up.
Has he sold any?
I don't know.
Oh.
But that's
Yeah.
Because I haven't seen. He came across my radar like I don't know, 20 or 30 years ago, and I haven't seen him since.
Okay, so he
And I never
was
knew
part
him
of
before.
some kind of network that you were
Well,
involved in, or
I don't know him personally, although I'd love to get in touch with him because I have some questions. But
okay.
I do see him as kind of somebody who didn't quite get the success he thought he was going to get. He got extremely bitter about that. He has now some strange views. But I have real fondness for Buffalo 66.
He was always a strange part.
Yeah, sure, but he got stranger. But Buffalo 66, I think, that passage I read about the land of antique shops,
Yeah.
that movie, I think, captures the Buffalo that I knew for just a little bit when I was a kid, before Buffalo started to change. And I watched that movie for that sense of nostalgia, to see those shots of downtown and see he takes a piss on my high school, in one of the early scenes. So,
Okay.
You know what I mean? I think it's a good film.
Yeah, I think it's a good film too. I just didn't, because I've never even been to Buffalo, so I couldn't judge
Yeah. Well, it won't look like that anymore.
to what extent. Yeah, I understand that. But like I say, I saw what he did and how he went about it, and basically, he just had as many different irons in the fire as possible simultaneously, as a painter, as a writer, as an actor, as a musician. If he couldn't get a part acting in a movie being made downtown, he would try to compose the soundtrack for the film, and then he was painting. I think I mentioned that, and then he got started to get major breakthroughs through his supposed sexual prowess, which connects to what I said about the Whitney being a blueprint to the downtown New York sexual network, and specifically by having sex with major dealers and stuff like that.
That part of the story.
That stuff.
I hadn't heard that part of the story.
That stuff brings. Yeah,
except
it's been known
where
to
is
bring
he now?
results.
I mean,
Yeah, he did kind of fall off the radar. I think he had Buffalo 66 was critically acclaimed.
But that doesn't-
Brown Bunny was a flop, and he hasn't done anything since then.
Yeah, well, that's entirely true, but funnily enough, I chalked that up to success, financial success, because he bought a bunch of properties in Manhattan.
Oh,
In Manhattan,
So he's rich.
he's rich.
okay.
Yeah, and I've noticed this with more people than him, that people who even maybe they inherited a lot of money at a certain point, it often results in what they were aiming to do grinding to a halt, and they wind up, and all their ambition winds up being destroyed by their money.
It's not my fate.
Mine neither. But I've seen it happen multiple times, including with other filmmakers.
Yeah. Well, I think I know we started a little bit late and it's getting on, so we might wrap up unless anybody else has anything else to say. But otherwise, thank you both, and thanks everybody for coming.